David Shapiro here. The interview that we're about to play is with Mark Sprague. Unfortunately, he couldn't get his video to work, so you're going to mostly just see me on the screen and then maybe his photo or whatever pops up. But the content is so valuable if you were thinking about buying or selling, or you're just interested on what's going on in Austin. So to hear from him directly, all he does day to day is look at the data and talk to people about what's going on, and not like buyers and sellers, but he's talking about to companies that are making decisions. Are they going to move their headquarters to Austin? Are they going to bring jobs to Texas? And so to hear from him is super valuable. He talks about the one announcement that nobody's even mentioning. I've never even heard anybody else talk about this. And he actually says it's more impactful than Apple, Tesla, any of these other announcements. So listen up. This is a really amazing interview. And please comment, like, subscribe, and we'll get more of this great content out to you. You're welcome. Let me get this going live on EXP's workplace here in the Austin Metro Group. We've got some people watching on Zoom, but I want to throw it up on there too, in case anybody has technical difficulties with Zoom.
Besides Mark, is what he meant to say.
Yeah, I was going to call you out there, but figured I'd give you a break. Mark, are you technically an economist?
I am technically not an economist. I was not trained as an economist. I just have a passion for it. I've been very blessed at corporations, but I was always the guy that would look at the numbers, the inventory, not just real estate, whether it's computers, whether it's RAMs, random access memory, whatever it may be, number of consumers, turnover. So I've always been one to, particularly after the 80s, to be aware of where we were putting treasury, i.e., it may sound like $100 million is a lot to spend nationwide, but if you're a production builder or if you're an investment group, $100 million, and let's say you're trying to invest in 30 markets, that's not much. So you have to be very aware of the numbers. And so, for lack of a better term, I was always trying to make my message more palatable for the investment committees. And so I think because of that, I backed into many formulas, many theories, and it's humbling when you then visit with a Texas A&M Research or Federal Reserve, and they say something, and you go, well, I've always thought it was 6 months, or it was 10 people per 1,000 square feet or whatever, and they go, I've never heard that. And that is great. And I guess that's just how my mind has always thought. I was also one of those that in algebra and calculus, I could not show my work the way the teacher wanted to, but I got most of the answers. So that may be part of the issue, but and it was interesting because I think my dad's conversation, he didn't come to a lot of teacher conferences, but my mom said, he goes, is it the right answer? And she goes, yes, but he's not doing the work. And he goes, is it the right answer? And she goes, yes, but he gets graded on his work. And he goes, if it's the right answer, why does he have to show his work? He says, I do understand I'm an engineer by trade, and he also had a law degree. And he said, but I can't tell you how he's coming up with it. If he is copying, which I hope not, I will paddle him within an inch of his life, and he's told me he's not copying. And I actually I think I've always had that kind of, not creativity, but I'm also solution oriented, as Carol will tell you. I tend to look at things and go, that's not quite right.
Let me jump in there. I think we have all our attendees, right?
Yeah, and we're live on Workplace.
David, let you kick this off formally, and if you like, I'm happy to introduce Mark and sort of explain his relationship with independence, and then can turn it over to you.
Cool, go for it.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I am Kara McGregor with Independence Title. My official title is Senior Vice President of Business Development. it just means I get to talk to a lot of great clients and move a lot of paper around internally. I get to work with Kendra Zepeda, who's hosting our call today. And she is a point of light for me all the time, as I'm sure she is for you. Joining us today also is Mark Sprague, and you're going to see his lovely headshot there. For better or for worse, his video will not cooperate today. So you can look at his headshot and listen to his voice. And that may turn out to be better after all, because, you know, in Zoom land, one never knows what you're going to get when people turn the camera on. Mark Sprague is familiar to some of you. He's our in-house analyst. He's been a significant strategic partner for us since he joined our company many years ago, and particularly during the madness of 2020 with the needle moving every day, the market changing, the news blowing up. Mark has been a significant partner in helping us understand what we need to know, cut through the noise, you know, which headlines matter for us and which can we just put over there and keep on going. So I look forward to opening the door for him to share some ideas with you. I know David's got some questions prepared and going to hold Mark's feet to the fire. I'm going to stay on the call just a little bit to get things going, and then I'm going to say goodbye subtly. I will not interrupt, but I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Kara. So I'm David Shapiro. I'm a realtor with eXp. I know we have some agents with eXp Realty watching live, and then the recording, I'm sure others, you know, some buyers potentially that are interested in what's going on in the market are going to be checking this out. Mark, we first met, it was 8 years ago. I got invited to a luncheon. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but ever since I was very impressed with what you had to say and have been a follower. And we've chatted, I think, a couple times a year since then. And in the fall, we were having a conversation and the market was already really strong. And I said, Mark, is it going to get easier for buyers in 2021? And you said, no, it'll probably only get harder. And here we are in January, and that has come to fruition. For some context for everybody watching and why we're so interested to hear what you have to say is in a strong seller's market of a couple of years ago, there was, you know, about 2,500 single family homes on the market in Austin. And right now, and I say this because a lot of people hear that Austin's been hot. It's like, well, it's been hot for years. But right now we're sitting at 350 single family homes on the market in the city of Austin. So a staggering drop in inventory, 75% over 2 years. And that's leading to competitive market for buyers, multiple offers. And we've heard some crazy stories. So maybe we could just start, Mark, with what is causing this low inventory?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, there's many indicators, and understand that economics and analytics, there's no absolute answers. It's based on theories and on historical norms. And so we look at those, and I'm going to back up right there. A great example is COVID. COVID was low probability. There's no way that any of us that do what I do would have forecast that a virus would shut down our economy. That was something that happened in movies and books. It didn't happen in reality. So we look at high probability events. We look at history. And one of the things that we could tell last year is historically, we've gone through about, for the last 30 years, we've gone about through about 23 to 30% of all listings that are brought on that month. By last June, of course, we had a dramatic slowdown in March and April. By last June, that suddenly shot up to 45%. By August, it was 98%. And now we're at that point where it's over 100% of the amount of listings coming on the market are being absorbed. When I say 100%, that doesn't mean 100% of all listings are sold, because you do have those listings that are overvalued in the market, particularly a market like this. But I'm just talking about pure numbers. So that's one thing that happened. That's caused because of a job creation. I mean, we take for granted what's happening here in Austin, that it is happening everywhere. But understand, for the last number of months, $1 billion is going to build a plant for Tesla. A 600,000 is going to build a headquarters for BAE system. Army Futures Command spent $3.5 billion on startups just out of Austin last year. You have Samsung, who is, by the way, Samsung's plant here is the largest foreign investment in our nation. And when it was first started, it was the largest. It was $3 billion. It is now they've invested over $17 billion in it, and they plan to spend another 10 to 17 billion. Well, no other metros are seeing that any place in the United States or in the world. So job creation is the first thing to look at. And then lastly, low interest rates. Low interest rates have caused people that normally would not be able to qualify for houses. It's allowed them to get the market. Qualifications are harsher than they were, say, 15 years ago. That's the good news. So we shouldn't have a financial meltdown. But again, all those things have helped. Now, as you know, one of the things I immediately look at when you say your sales are slow in San Diego or other cities outside of Austin, I look at gross domestic product, and our GDP individually in Texas and in Austin has remained fairly strong throughout that. And that's a measure of everything you do, I do, Dell does, all major corporations. So, but I could tell with the absorptions that we wouldn't be able to get there from here. Could I have told you that it would be where it is here in January, where a entry level home of $350 to $450 would be selling for $100,000 over? No, I couldn't have told you that because, again, we're looking for historical norms, and where we are now has not happened since MLS started tracking all this in 1990. So we will continue to see this. I see it lasting at least another 2 years. Builders cannot catch up either, but there's an interesting juxtaposition there. If I look at probably last October, November, I met with the people that run Metro Studies Zonda, which is what the new home builders watch. They track every development, every lot, et cetera. We thought we'd have too many lots by the end of the year 2020. The market has proven different, and what you can't see is me smiling, that sarcastic smile that I get, but I'm going, yeah, that's what keeps us on our toes. The numbers show us something different every day, every month, and that was one of those things. In the past, I've spoken Home Builders Association in 2004 and said, Texas Home Builders Association said too many lots, too many homes, too many apartments. And of course, had a lot of clients upset because I said, we need to eat through that inventory. This will cause potentially some bankruptcies. And that's before I even got into the whole mortgage side of it. So we look at many indicators, and those are historical norms. And sometimes those norms are not, do not go to the historical norms, so to speak. And a good example is if I look at any hard asset, such as real estate, silver, gold, et cetera, I look at any hard asset, it typically goes from a recessionary, from a recovery period to an expansion period to a hypersupply to recession. Well, Austin, as I just said, and Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston were all on the edge of being where they had too much supply. And yet we've reversed that circle. Instead of that circle continuing to go clockwise, it went counterclockwise because you got more consumption. And that has to do with many reasons. I mean, people always go, well, the reason people are moving to Texas is because of lower cost of living, no state income tax, no corporate tax, lower tax burden. And yes, those are all good reasons, but having been involved with the governor's office when Toyota came to Dallas, the reason that they came to Dallas was none of those. They needed 100,000 square feet contiguous fairly quickly. Uh, there was a boom and a bust in Dallas, so you had 100,000 square feet contiguous with a large parcel across the street. They're looking at two other metros nationally. And then they ask the question, what's your state income tax? What's your cost of living? And people go, no, that's the reason I came here. I said, look, I was in the room. And they asked those questions afterwards. They made a fairly comfortable decision that they were leaning towards the Dallas-Fort Worth, Plano area, and then they made the decision fairly quickly once they understood those other things. And it's interesting because our announcements here, the Tesla announcement, the Oracle announcement, were not announcements. They were actually 10K stock filings that said, hey, Tesla said, by the way, we spent $100 million down in Austin, not on the land, but on an option to buy some land from a defense contractor. And then everybody said, did anybody know that Tesla bought this acreage down in Southeast Austin? And then the questions came. Same thing with Oracle. Oracle was in their 10K. So again, we look at norms, and the norms are changing. And I would say what COVID's done is it's kind of compressed trends. So it typically takes 20 years, and it's compressed into a much quicker environment, almost like a year. So I could tell, and I shared with my management. I said, hey, we're going through listings quicker than we have historically. And I think I got different responses from everybody. I don't think anybody said I was wrong, but they went, and I'm sure some of them thought to themselves, what a nerd he is. He knows that it typically is 23% of all inventory have gone through, and now it's shot up to 45%. I mean, I know that he reads a lot, but that is just who watches stuff like that. And David, I'm one of those that watches. I'm one of those guys that companies would bring in, and if it was taking 6 months to build a road or a house in a certain part of the country, and it was taking 2 years in another part of the country, I was the guy that went through the process of figuring out why. And sometimes there's good reason. People always want to blame somebody for their lack of inventory, their lack of luck, et cetera. And there's always a determining factor, and it may not be the factor that you think it is. It may be something that you've not even thought of. And that's where I think my expertise comes in as I go, well, it's because David Shapiro's online shopping all the time is why it shot up. And I'm kidding you personally, but you know what I'm talking about. I don't think we've known that retail was going to change the last 20 plus years, but I don't think we could see it coming this aggressively, where it have such a phenomenal year, but it's going to hurt so many retail companies. Does that make sense? So there's so many indicators.
Are you a fan of spurious correlations? Do you know that site?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's causation versus correlation. It's like the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with the films Nicolas Cage appeared in. It's a site you might like, and some of the viewers talking about things that, how do some of these things correlate? I want to talk, so you mentioned two main factors leading to low inventory. So job creation in Austin and low interest rates. Job creation is not directly maybe linked to COVID. Low interest rates, you could say, is. I think this is interesting. This is a chart you guys put out with the months of inventory. And if you look at 2020 in yellow, prior to when we knew we were hitting a pandemic here in January and February of last year, inventory was already 30% lower. And I think the thing to know here is that this is a multi-year trend. Now, once the pandemic, Texas opened back up, you can see inventory just dropping at a significant rate, much lower than it maybe would have otherwise. So what were the COVID effects? Like, how much of this is attributed to that? Because talking to people in other markets, they think their market, like Connecticut, for example, that's where I grew up, talking to friends there, it feels like this is a temporary thing, while New York City, people are leaving New York and they're going out to the suburbs like Connecticut. Whereas here in Austin, it doesn't feel temporary to me. It feels like this is a permanent, continued trend that we're going to have low inventory. What are you seeing?
I think that Americans, particularly Americans, basically don't look out past 2 or 3 years. Investors, the Asian population, particularly China and the other Asian cities, not so much the Indian population or Pakistanis, they have a much longer look. But looking 2 to 3 years out, I think it's going to take us a couple of years to catch up. And resale is going to be, we won't have enough inventory at the end of this year. Resale wise, will be 11,000 plus or minus lots short, even though we're bringing on a record number of lots, 27,705 lots are being, and that's the highest number I've seen in my 45 plus years watching in Austin. So I do see, again, it goes back to job creation. For every 3 jobs, 1 home start, for every 5 jobs, one apartment unit start. So I'm one of the few individuals, and I did this to protect my company and my treasury when I was in production. I would look at the total number of living units coming on the market. That included not only home starts and resales, but also look at apartments. And so if there was, in presently for a number of years, we haven't had enough living units coming onto this market. And there's a number of reasons for that. Since the meltdown in 07, 05, it's hard to get financing for developments. It used to be, when I first got in the business, you could do a development and it makes sense. Typically, developments only make sense when you can drop 150 lots or more on the market at one time for production builders and production developers. But it used to be, I could put 20% down, then it shot up to 40%. Presently, it's around between 40 and probably closer to 60% equity down. And people go, well, that makes no sense. And I said, if your lender makes all the sense in the world, if the market goes against you, you've got that buffer. And so lending's harder, and so it's not easy to develop apartments, office buildings, et cetera. So that will continue to compress the market. Secondly, one of the things that Austin does is the development process is a little bit longer here than it is in other parts of the state. And developers that are from other parts of the state kind of try to avoid Austin if they've never been here. Whereas people that come from other parts of the country, such as Florida or California, where the entitlement process, and that entitlement is from the time I buy a piece of land to the time that I can start building on it. In California, it can be 8 to 15 years. In Florida, it's typically about 8 to 10 years. And here in Texas, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, it's anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months. Here in Austin, it's 2 years, so that slows us down. We would be in the same position that Houston, Dallas get in. Houston currently has 45,000 lots on the ground. Has a slowdown because they laid off 345,000 people last year. And we will see potentially some foreclosures down there. We won't see them here. So that entitlement process slows us down. Now, 2 years ago, I told you, hey, I thought we'd have too many lots. And so as a former consultant, I would say that banks and equity listens to that. And it's not just me saying that, it's other people that do what I do, Zondo, MetroStudy, Residential Strategies, Myers Group. So we all saw that, and lenders tend to tighten up. And then let's throw COVID in there. Last March, historically, we knew 1 out of 5 businesses could go away. We thought 1 out of 4 restaurants would go away. They'll come back in another form, but just not in the form that they were. So the banks have to beef up the reserves. And if they have to beef up the reserves, then they're going to look at real estate and other hard assets and make it harsher to lend. So COVID had that effect of tightening the market up dramatically. I think it'll continue to have that. And for those that think that COVID will get past this and will turn to normal, no. The new normal is that COVID will be in the back of our mind. If it only lasted 90 days, 180 days, I don't think we would have the mindset. But from this point forward, whether it's a birth, a wedding, graduations, that COVID spread, that virus spread will be in the back of our minds. So that will affect everything from the way you do business to the way that equity thinks about lending. So do I think that lending will get easier anytime soon? No. And historically, anybody that says that, whether they're in the equity or lending business, I don't mean this meanly, but I look at their age and see if they've been through a couple downturns to see where they're making that decision. If they're making that decision based on chutzpah, or if they're making that decision based on analytics. And typically, the older you get, the wiser you should get. And so when I visit with equity on Wall Street, a lot of times I'll get the pushback, or we're overpaying for the property commercially. And my pushback is, you've been looking for 2 years and haven't found anything else. How long do you plan to keep this? 15 years. Well, then you're not overpaying. The market will catch up to you. So as far as post-COVID and pre-COVID pricing, if that's what you're asking, I don't think residentially there's any effect. It just will change procedures. Commercially, absolutely, there's an effect. 3 types of commercial properties it has no effect on, and those are industrial warehouse, which is A++, multifamily, which is in the A category, and then office, which is probably at A- category. Then at the other end of the grading system, under F, to F minuses, would be hospitality, leisure, and retail. And when I throw this out there, equity's not lending on those. And people go, what do you mean they're not lending on those? I say just what I said. It's interesting. Americans, our nation, consumers are the only ones that think that lending is constitutional right. They go, well, there's got to be some lending. I'm going, yeah, 80% down and a 14% interest rate. Well, that's not lending. I go, well, you asked. So hospitality, leisure, and retail will take a number of years to recover. And it's going to be interesting because housing typically leads a recession, both on the going down and coming up. In this time, looking at historical norms, this hasn't followed any historical norms, David. It's separated itself. And a great example is, I don't think any of us could have told you that lumber, refrigerators would have the demand they have. I mean, refrigerator demand went up 900% last year. And people go, well, why? I said, you're eating more. I said, not you personally, but people bought second and third refrigerators because they're buying more food. They're not going out to eat. Lumber, do-it-yourselfers, people fixing stuff up around the house. I try to avoid that as much as possible personally, but you can't find lumber at Lowe's. You can't find at any of the lumber yards a framing package for an average size house, 1,600 square feet. At the start of last year, it was $2,600. By the end of the year, it was at near $13,000. Materials and labor is going up 2 to 3% a month. And I've got all, I was following these futures and believed that, but then saw some surveys that show that. And I think this year we'll see labor and materials going up at least someplace between 7% to 10% a quarter. Think about that.
What percent of the cost of the home is that?
Lumber?
Or just like materials that are going up in cost in general?
Generally, they're probably about someplace between 22 to 28% of the total cost. But then you've got land, you've got streets, you've got utilities, you've got carry, marketing. What you do and what I do to a great extent is less than a total of 6%. But labor and materials historically have stayed someplace under 30%, and it's just the carrying costs. And we're blessed here in Texas and Austin. I worked with a company that had stuff in Florida, and if certain turtles started hatching, certain birds started hatching, you shut down your whole operation in that development. And when people go, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't care if you had sheetrock and a lumber package sitting out there on the driveway. You covered it with a tarp, checked it every day, but you could not touch any building till that wildlife process had been through." So that slowed down the process greatly. In California, it's some other issues. And people go, "You're anti-environmentalist." I said, "I'm not at all. I'm just giving you facts that slow down the process." And we don't have that here. Austin's fairly liberal in the building standards, but we've also become fairly protective. I mean, one of the great examples, do you know what air spading is?
Yeah, when you got to go around the tree roots.
Yes, well, see, I grew up in development never doing that. And so I had to explain that to my wife, who's been around me forever. And she said, "What's air spading?" I said, "Well, you get a huge compressor like you'd see on a jackhammer, and you have these metal pipes, and somebody sits there and digs around the edge of the tree, loosening up and shooting oxygen or air around the roots." And she goes, "Well, what does that do?" And I said, "Supposedly, it makes the tree healthier. So as it goes through the shock of development around it, it protects that tree." And she goes, and she's looking at me. I mean, I could tell by her expression she didn't believe me, but see, do stuff like that, and that's some of the good attributes. But the other side of that is that all that slows down the process. For every time we slow down the process, it costs us more. Affordability. You've always had to drive till you qualified. Whether it's a rental, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a house. And a great example is I grew up in the Bracker Woods, Pemberton area. That used to be my paper route, blah, blah, blah. When I started making better money, worked for a large, probably owned home builder in the nation, who obviously was the largest builder here in Nashville at Scopus. I thought I could buy in my neighborhood. Well, when I went to go see a banker friend who happened to be much older, first comment he said was, "Sit down, boy." And I knew I said something wrong. He explained to me. And so I ended up buying a $35,000 house off of Kramer, which, by the way, at the time was Edgetown. It's a brand new house. I was kind of embarrassed because I really wanted to show people that I was doing much better with all the income I was making at age 25, 26. Then I found out all my friends, college friends, high school friends, were moving out to the same neighborhoods I was. So you're always going to have to drive till you qualify. Affordability and desirability work in direct opposition of each other. If I suddenly offered 1,000 more lots in central Austin, after the first sale, the values would go up so rapidly that it would not be affordable. So for those that gripe about affordability in Austin, my response is, "Well, what are you looking to pay?" And their answer may be $350. And I said, "Well, you need to look at Liberty Hill. You need to look at it, Gerald. You need to look at, I don't want to live there." A typical response is, "I want to live where I grew up in Barton Hills or in 04. And I go, "Well, I don't know of anything that price point because the land is so expensive. It has to do nothing with a dwelling." And Kendra and others will tell you this. I've not picked on them, but sometimes, I don't care if it's a guy or what sex it is, I'll go, "Well, you have some really nice golf clubs and guns and rifles in your collection. I see you're buying that all the time. You need to be saving that money because none of that's appreciating that you're buying. And real estate will appreciate." And I said, everybody goes through that exotic car stage, or exotic vehicle stage, whether it's motorcycle, whatever it is. We start making money and maybe our hobby is playing golf or whatever it is. And we start spending more money in that. rather than saving, which, by the way, has been interesting this year. Savings has shot through the roof because nobody's spending money outside of their online spending. So I would say that affordability will always be there. And one of the neat things that new home builders are doing is your affordable housing. They're building on smaller lots to bring that value down. So they're building on anywhere from 50-foot to 30-foot lots just to bring that value down. And we'll continue to see that. We are very much an affordable city with the cities that we compete against. And the cities that we compete against typically have a higher educational attainment. Well, there's only 4 cities that have a higher educational attainment than Austin, and that's going to be San Jose, San Francisco, Boston, and Washington, D.C. So we're in a good place comparatively. We in Texas, there's only been a total of 4 cities. It's actually done less than that. It's now 3 cities that have fully recovered from the previous recession in 2007, 2009. Used to be 8 cities, 4 in Texas, 4 outside Texas. It used to be Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and New York. Then the 4 cities in Texas were Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio. Well, fully recovered from the previous recession would be full GDP, full employment prior to that recession, and then full real estate values. Well, only three metros nationally hit that mark: DFW, San Antonio, and Austin. Houston's not there anymore because of the massive layoffs in oil and gas. So again, we're affordable, but there's our pricing is appropriate, but you always have to drive till you qualify. And that's not our nature. I mean, I think all of us make a mistake. First credit card we get, we go, it's free money. Not till we get, 6 months later and we realize we're a couple $1,000s in debt, but want to go talk to our parents. And so we're eating noodles and rice for the next 6 months as we practice on savings. But those were all those life lessons that we learned.
Mark, so you mentioned that we're priced appropriately, and I think the people watching would say, well, that made sense in December. But what we're seeing in January with these multiple offers and people going 10 or 15 or 20% in some cases, we've heard, in terms of the price above what things were selling for in December. Like, that couldn't be right. I look at supply and demand and say, well, if supply is really low, demand's high, what other levers are there? Well, there's price. And so price can move up until we hit some sort of equilibrium. So can prices go up 20% in the first quarter and then just stay there and continue to appreciate? Like, what could we see here with price?
It's hard to say, but as a city, I'd be surprised if we get much over single digit as a city area, SMSA, statistical marketing sales area. I don't see us going over a high single digit, low double digits. We will see some parts of town in the 30s, and historically before this, when you in new developments where it was production builders. Once the production builders, first year that the production builders got out of there, we historically would see anywhere from a 20 to 35% appreciation those first couple of years because they weren't competing against the big guys. There's no such thing as equilibrium on price. The market dictates that. We look for equilibrium with demand on the amount of inventory and the consumption. And presently, we have a need for more consumption than we have inventory. On lots, it's typically 24 months. On resale homes, it's typically 6 months. On apartments, and again, that changes with the amount of demand you're having, and your demand is so high. But again, I tend to be conservative, as you know. I don't see that getting out of whack this year. And out of whack to me would be what the Sand States went through, where the state of California in 2005, 2006, as a state, was seeing 46% appreciation annual. So I could buy a piece of land or a house or an office building, not do a thing to it, and see that type of appreciation or better. At the same time, Austin was seeing, Texas was seeing about 2.6% appreciation. Of course, when I pointed that out, everybody, I could hear the whole audience go, I'm going, no, they have no place to go but down, and then we have no place to go but up. I would say, because we compare ourselves to other cities, we think we're expensive. But again, the cities we need to compare to are the cities that have higher educational attainment. And then the popularity, the coolness, whatever you want to call it, of Austin has turned dramatically. Many years ago, when I was doing the focus groups for Barton Creek and all that, and was in other parts of the country doing focus groups, and we'd mentioned we were from Austin or developing in Austin, the response was, you have a Boston in Texas. And it sounds like I'm joking, but I'm not. So people didn't know where Austin was. Now, whether it's because of the music festivals, whether it's because of Willie Nelson, whatever the reason is, Austin has become much, much higher visibility wherever you are in the world. And I think it'll continue to be. I believe that Texas, as a general state, is where California was in 1950. The land of opportunity, because people are looking to get away from the high regulations and taxes in California. And a great example, presently California has put a number of regulations in place that are going to drive corporations and people out. San Jose, no more natural gas. The governor's office has suggested, has legislation passed that no gasoline, all clean vehicles by the year 2035. Would that be great and would be tremendously acceptable for the environment? Agree with all that. Except you have rolling brownouts presently in California. You cannot supply the amount of electricity you need in the state. And so I would get those things resolved first before I put these in place. Well, Texas, because we're a rural state, although we have the highest number of urban centers over a million population, 6, as a rural state, we're much more conservative. Property taxes are only tax vehicle. We don't have multiple taxes. So we'll continue to see fairly growth, but equilibrium pricing, there's no such thing. If I took bananas off the market for a couple of years, even though you and I can go buy a banana today for less than $1, if I took them off the market for a year and brought them on the market 2 years from now, I could sell a banana for $5 a piece. And you go, yes, but that's not fair. And I'm going, yeah, it is, because that's what's happening right now is you're taking the bananas away from the people. Now, something interesting that's happened is I heard about forbearance and foreclosures. And if I look at collections, they moved about 1% from where they were previous to this. So I don't see foreclosures being an issue in this marketplace in most of Texas metros. Forbearance, I don't see as an issue. But one of the interesting things we saw is larger apartment units, 3-bedroom and larger, suddenly saw a surge of demand and saw rents raise in that particular portion of the rental market. People go, what? I'm going, yeah. And I think that's families combining because of COVID that we're having issues elsewhere. Also, understand that you're in Austin, Texas. We've had the quickest rebound in the previous recession, 11 months. We've had the quickest rebound in this COVID on job recreation. I think we're down to 4,700 total people out of 128,900 that were laid off March and April. We're at 90 or 95% fully recovered, and there's no other metro, not only in the United States, but in the world that is back to that. So we'll continue to see demand rise. And I think you or somebody's asked a question, said, well, people aren't selling their house. And I said, that's because they turned my granddad. And you kind of cock your head and get like, my dog doesn't go, what? I'm going, they turned my granddad. They don't want to sell because interest rates are keeping them in their houses at 3%, 3.5% interest. They would rather rent that out. And so there's not as much inventory. People are no longer moving up in their neighborhoods because they're staying in their house much longer. They're staying in their house. When I got out of school, they'd move every 3 to 7 years. So about 5 years was the max. They're now to 13 to 15 years. I think that'll continue. Again, because of lower rates. Now, when rates do go up, you lose 1% buying power. By the way, every time rates go up, you lose 12% buying power. So we'll see business stop when that happens, and everybody jumps back in within 60, 90 days because they realize rates won't be coming back down again. Yeah. So all those have an effect on us. In recessions, we always know there was going to be a recessionary period. Going into last March, we think it had been at 137 months of expansion, which was a record for us. But we knew a recession was coming. You always are looking for indicators. An indicator that Kara shudders at, that is a true indicator, is the Global Men's Underwear Index. And people go, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "No, look it up." I personally learned of it many years ago, listening to Alan Greenspan when he spoke at the business school at UT. And he talked about it. He said, when times are bad, men quit buying underwear globally. And prior to March of last year, Men's Underwear Global Index predicted recession. It was all 50% for 3 or 4 months. So we knew recession was coming. We're already seeing recessionary periods in Europe. So again, we can never give you the reason. So there's lots of indicators, but those are historical norms. Those aren't always true. Am I concerned about pricing? Not presently, because I haven't seen speculation in this marketplace. The market is so strong that it makes it really hard for speculators to come in here and flip properties. And people go, "Well, there's a ton of investors." I said, "No, I don't think there is. I think it's market's less than 7%. California, the Sand States, California, Nevada, Arizona, Florida, we're seeing close to 40% speculation. Secondly, there's not speculative financing. You can't really flip houses easily because that financing is not available easily out there. So I do think values will continue to go up in all price points. I don't see it slowing. If anything, I think the next year, and people are particularly realtors are freaking out because they go, "I don't have anything to sell." I said, "No, other markets dealt with this where they don't have any inventory. You need to look at your compatriots in California and other markets where they saw this. So instead of being able to choose inventory from MLS, they would write letters, they would canvass neighborhoods very hard. They would work with their title company to find out who owns certain properties, et cetera. So I think when times are good, that even though you may be one of the best in town, you need to learn different ways to go acquire your business, because as times get better, whether it's computers, cars, homes, you've got to change your tactics because everybody else is going to copy what you're doing, and you've got to separate yourself from those. Probably more information than any of y'all wanted to know.
Well, and it seems a bit cyclical because if somebody's saying like, "Well, I'm not going to move because interest rates are low," and then the next person's saying, "Well, I can't move because I can't go buy a home. There's nothing that I can find that fits for me." So then they're not selling their homes, and then there's less inventory. So that could be at play too. Now, when we're looking at the neighborhoods that could jump 20%, and a buyer's saying, "Wow, I'm going 20% over what this would have sold for in December," is it possible that those prices hold? And so, yeah, they're going 20% above, but there's multiple offers, there's multiple people that are willing to pay that. So that is what it seems the market value is. So they can feel comfortable knowing that that price should stay stable at these new levels.
Absolutely. I mean, supply and demand. As long as you continue to have the demand, that value is going to stay up there. Whether it's a house, whether it's a banana, computer, whatever it is. And people go, "No, that's not right." And I'm saying it's absolutely correct. It goes back to supply and demand. So We don't have enough inventory. We won't have enough inventory, so those values will continue. And for those that think they're overpaying, I would ask you how long you're planning to stay in that property. And if you say a year, I said, yeah, you're definitely overpaying, but you're not going to find anything you're going to get your that's going to meet your market needs. It's like people coming, investors coming to me and asking for cash flow in this marketplace. So it's not going to happen. You need to go a market that's distressed. And this is not a distressed market in that sense. It's like equity coming to me and say, we've got $500 million. This is how we want to spend it, but we expect anywhere from a 4 to 10% discount. And I go, I don't say this, I think this. You're wasting my time. You're not going to find it here, because why does somebody need to discount it? Because you have money. So we will continue to see these values go up because of the demand. Demand's going to continue to happen because of job creation.
Yeah. It's interesting you say, just because you have money, you don't get a discount. I think some of us have been amazed at how many cash offers are being made. It's like, how does so many people have so much cash just sitting around that everybody's making cash offers? Any insight on that?
Yeah, yes, Dave. That's a very easy answer. Everybody wants to blame it on the Californians. That's less than 3% moving to Texas. If you look at savings nationally and locally, they have shot through the roof because people aren't spending money. So people do have a couple hundred, 300,000 they've saved over the last year if they're making, good money, because they're no longer going out to eat. They're no longer going out to drink. Although at home, alcohol consumption delivery has gone up. Alcohol taxes have gone down because people aren't drinking at bars and at hotels. But no, we will, again, it goes back to supply and demand. I don't see demand slowing down. And guess what? We haven't gotten any traction from our medical school of here in San Antonio. So we have all that to come down the pike. You've heard me speak, and people were excited about Apple. People were excited about Tesla. Still, the biggest deal that's happened in the last 10 years is Army Futures Command. They spent $3.5 billion on startups last year. They will continue to attract corporations that are moving here and continue to expand. And one of the things we need to always be careful about in looking at markets, and I'm going to pick on downtown Austin for a moment. Presently, the amenities that you only can use downtown, restaurants, stores, etc., are not open, are very seldom open. So what we've seen is a lot of panic selling downtown, or panic listing. At last I looked, which has been a couple of weeks, there was 400 listings downtown. Values haven't dropped. Sales haven't dropped. They're less than where we thought they were. But that's because people can't use their amenities. So people are looking to get out of their properties downtown. That's a mistake, because you have a number of corporations expanding downtown. Some of that's public knowledge. Not all that's public knowledge. So in 2 years, those values will continue to go up. There's 42 towers, condo and office that have been announced since first of last year. Equity is much more anal. Checking out what's happening to the marketplace. I used to do those market studies for those guys, and I'm telling you, they look at everything. And Austin continues to be near the top of markets to invest in, whether it's offices, whether it's apartments, whether it's condos. It's interesting because if I look at overall condos, just like the chart you showed up, the numbers are near the bottom. But if I look at downtown Austin, the listings have shot up. So what has happened there is people panic because of herd mentality. And I love herd psychology, economics psychology. But that's what's happening downtown is they can't use it. They feel like they're in a prison. Their friend says, get out of it. But they're not looking at what's happening long term. And so downtown will come back, and when it comes back, it'll come back very aggressively within the next 2 years. Same thing with our real estate. This is cyclical. For a year and a half, it'll continue to be a very tight market. And will begin to catch up because for any number of reasons, we can't build office buildings quickly enough. We don't have enough labor. The process has slowed, whatever it may be. But and know that we'll have a lot of commercial inventory coming on the market with hotels and restaurants and bars and retail not being able to open for fully for 18 months to 2 years. There will be opportunities in those arenas to either do residential, build another warehouse, whatever the need is. Now, somebody's got to write down that debt, but there's going to be opportunities. So yes, I do believe that it is funny, David, because I'm not picking on you and I'm not picking on your trade, but the only people I hear saying they're overpaying are the realtors. I don't hear the customers saying that from other markets. They may be in shock if they move here from Atlanta or Chicago. They may think that they're going to, they have to get into the wave of getting turned down a couple of times, but then they get right into it. But it's the realtors that are saying, well, this is way over the market from where it was a year ago. Well, you know what the client's hearing? Dummy, you should have bought a year ago. So I'm not picking on you, but I hear this all the time, whether it's California, you know, when markets are hot, is, well, it's way over the market. And I'm going, demand's there, supply's not there. So how's it over the market if they're going to stay in there a while? Office building, you know, large equity guys, particularly younger guys, will go, we're overpaying the market of what historical appreciation's been. And I said, and you're not going to get any more buildings like that. So either decide to buy it or don't. And usually there's an older risk analyst in the room. He'll just smile at him because he's been finding the same thing. The young guys are wanting historical norms, something they read in the book that they've learned and think that that applies 100% of the time. And again, those indicators change all the time. Yeah. Again, long-winded answer to your question, but very truthful on my part.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think people that have been in Austin a long time, they see the prices and they're like, it's overpriced. And then you have people from California or New York City saying, man, it's inexpensive in comparison. And I think it's all relative. I think our market compared to those markets, the median price is something like 45%. So we're still less than half the median price of some of those markets. So there's definitely affordability here.
Don't blame it on the Californians, because 55 to 60% of everything being bought in Texas is Texans. They're moving from other cities. They've saved up that money. But we don't hear that, do we? We blame the traffic on the Californians. We blame the values on the Californians. We blame the politics on the Californians. And they're less than 3%. Yeah, is there some of that? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you know, when you go look at it, there is a broker brought me 2 young brothers, younger than you. They're going to inherit. They inherited a house from their mom, and a billionaire has bought that house. It's on less than an acre, and they will have $50 million to invest. And you go, what? Yeah, I said one house. It does have a view of the bay, everything, but $50 million happens to be a billionaire that he's going to pay that to them. So, you know, they're looking at apartment projects, they're looking at warehouse parks in other cities besides Austin, although they really want to come to Austin. So, yes, when we look at something like that, we go, that's crazy. You know, and I'm going, is it? Is it crazy? Because obviously somebody's willing to pay that $50 million for that single house in San Francisco. So it's all relative. I have a friend that lived in England, and where he lived in England was near Kensington Palace. It's 2,000 a square foot for rent, residential. You can't build. It's also one of the few places in the world you'll find iceberg homes. People go, what's an iceberg home? Well, that 200 acres happens to be owned by one of the dukes, and they can't sell the property by law. So people lease them for 100 years, and what they do is there may be the maximum height, I think, is 3 stories. So what very wealthy people are doing is building 5, 9 stories below the building, and that's an iceberg home. Look it up, y'all. It's such thing. But again, values are go back to supply and demand. The reason it's $2,000 a square foot rent is that's what the going price is, because there's a lot of world wealth there. And that's the other thing. We have a lot of world wealth. I would say 35% of your sales downtown are from outside the state. And I don't know how much is outside the country, but growing up, the only other language we would hear would be Spanish. Now you can go downtown, you hear Spanish, you hear multiple Arab dialects, you hear Asian dialects. So that's the other thing. Again, there's so many more people coming here. And one of the interesting things we're seeing finally that we're seeing in Dallas and around Houston and around Phoenix, we're beginning to see foreigners getting their money out of other countries, such as the Asians, such as the Indians, and running land values up, particularly out east of town. And I think that will continue to happen. And that goes back to supply and demand. I definitely, that land they're buying, raw land, I can't make money doing commodities, cotton, cattle, wheat, etc. So the only thing that's driving that value up is turning that land, so to speak.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. We're already over an hour. Can we do 8 more minutes and then call it? Okay,
Sure.
cool. So we have one question here from the audience. So if prices go up 20 to 30%, is that going to push some, I guess, decrease demand? Because now maybe it's local. So if you look at, they're looking at a certain neighborhood, demand at that price point now would go down because they needed a 2,000 square foot home. And now they can't buy a 2,000 square foot home in that neighborhood. So they have to go to somewhere else. So is it possible that decreases demand?
It decreases, no, it increases demand for that neighborhood.
So even if prices go up 20% in a neighborhood, we won't see demand go down.
You look at history, whether it's 03, 46, 04, you have greater demand as prices have gone up. Because of location. You know this, all of you know this. Real estate, what is it about? Location, location, location. And anybody that thinks that location equals affordability is sadly mistaken. Affordability and location do not work together. As I said, desirability and affordability work in direct opposition of each other. Even if I could produce a massive amount of housing units, by the time I sell that second one, it's gone up in value dramatically. So
assuming you can't create so much supply that it just totally floods the market and there's like 10x the supply as there is demand or something like that.
Well, the only reason that has happened historically is because speculation in the marketplace, and the banks aren't allowing that. Equity's not allowing that. They haven't allowed that since the financial meltdown. There's been movies made about that, and I'm not being arrogant. I mean, in the markets I grew up with, production building and even custom building, most houses would appraise for 10, sometimes 20 points over what we were building the house for. And people go, no. And I'm going, yeah, back then it worked. So we could fit financing, we could fit some other upgrades into that appraisal. And it would still hit the appraisal, whereas we have the opposite problem now. Now, demand wasn't as great. So demand is going to continue to be very strong here in Dallas-Fort Worth. I would say it's stronger in Dallas-Fort Worth than it is Austin. Again, we tend to look through our glasses here. So, and I keep hearing 20, 30%. That's not a citywide appreciation. We're not going to see that. If we were getting up to there, I would have some concern. And for your knowledge, I know that I get calls from our city manager and assistant city managers, and they're trying to figure out the solution to the problem. There is not a real solution other than looking at the inventory that will be in trouble, such as hotels, retail, et cetera, and looking how we can convert that. So, and as I told them, I said, you should have been addressing this 5 years ago. And I said, but 5 years ago, if you'd come to me and said, we're going to address this, I would have said, no, it's not a problem. And so this problem's been exacerbated by the entitlement process. It's been exacerbated by low rates. COVID caused people to get, it's been interesting. My friends my age, for y'all that don't know how old I am, I'm 67. Friends my age, instead of moving down, they bought rural houses, Salado, Kerrville, Mason, but they're keeping their house here. So they have a city house and a country house, much like Londoners have. Some of them have bought another place on the coast. So I see that money being spent, and people go, where's this money coming from? And I'm going, people are saving a ton of money. Savings, if you go to any of my classes, you'll see savings has shot up through the roof and spending's not gone up as rapidly. And so that's where all this money is coming from. And it will continue to. Plus, I mean, taxes are different. By the way, if you are not aware, if you make over 400,000, your capital taxes will change under the Biden administration. I don't think that's a bad deal. People that make over 400,000 are probably very accepting of that. They'll find the tax vehicles to keep under that if they're not comfortable doing that. But and the thing that's going to exacerbate our issues locally and nationally is the Biden administration, hopefully this year, will pass a $15,000 first-time home buyer tax rebate. And so you think you don't have inventory now, let me give you a little bit more incentive to buy. And rates are low, and I don't see rates going up because our inflation's not going up. And people, the response is there, well, inflation is going up. I said, no, it's not. Real estate, gas, and food are not included in inflation because of the volatility of it. If I look at manufactured goods, such as a laptop, such as the lights we're all using for Zoom, those are one-time sales. Those are not consistent sales that affect inflation, like eating, like clothes. Whether you think that you buy clothes cyclical, yes or no, you do. It's a cyclical buy. So, and real estate historically has not been, and that's what you're complaining about, not complaining about, but ask me about, is there's not enough inventory. People aren't turning their inventory off over enough. I think that will continue.
I'm just a big complainer over here.
You're not, you understand where you're coming from. You have not been through this. I've been through this a couple of times, more than a couple of times. I've never seen it exacerbated this much, but I've never seen Austin as popular as it is. I mean, growing up, we had 7 to 11 millionaires. We have more than that in billionaires presently. And people go, well, that's what I'm talking about. I'm going, look, if you think things are going to stay static, I'm here to tell you, I'd love to have a 30-inch waist again. I exercise a lot. I do my sit-ups. I'm not going to see a 30-inch waist again. Everybody knows that, including myself.
Yeah, I think sometimes people have a hard time with change. I've come to embrace it being in real estate in Austin and see the benefits that have come from Austin changing. And of course, there's some, I reminisce about, the old days, and that was nice 10 years ago. You even further back, of course. So you talked about the savings rates are up. I think, inflation on the consumer side, but what about inflation on assets? And, as stocks have gone crazy, real estate prices in Austin have gone up. I think people feel like they're wealthier. They certainly are. And so some of that money could be from there, but it's like 20 or 30% of the dollars in circulation, in digital circulation have been printed in the last year. Is it something like that? How has that been impacting this? And then the inflation of assets as we move forward?
Well, my equity is like water. It searches for a vessel. And if savings have gone up, it's going to search for a vessel to invest in. The two hard assets that make most sense right now would be real estate first and stock market second. But let's not get all enthralled with what stock market's done, because you're forgetting it's moved over 30,000 points since last March. It dropped almost 11. It went back to 11, dropped 3, going back. So you've had, and not all the stocks. I mean, some of the tech stocks have done well. Some of the other stocks have not done so well, Exxon, et cetera. So equity, there's a finite of equity since before Jesus, and that amount's still there, just inflation has driven it up. Now, people go, what about Bitcoin? I said, that's speculative, that's not a hard asset. So, but real estate and stocks make sense right now and will continue to make sense. But again, stock market, if anything, has been volatile the last year, with every right to be. Whereas real estate, we didn't have enough shelter going into this. David, you've heard me say this before. And people go, yeah. I'm going, coming out of this, if you shut down operations, how do you think you're going to have more shelter, whether it's warehouses, office, apartments, or homes? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I said, well, and I'm not yelling at you. It's a great question. But I said, the other thing is people think we can restart lumber mills. We can restart refrigerator mills just by you showing up to the office. And that's not how mills work. They take the labor may have moved out of town in that month shutdown because those people are living paycheck to paycheck. And I don't like this comment, but it's true. In March, I said to Wall Street and the people in Wall Street and to the politicians, we will see a separation of classes very much so in this present recession, because the top of the K was 80% people that have remote capabilities, people have probably a higher education, people that probably make over $60,000, they will be reemployed right away. Anybody making under, say, 30,000 are 21% still unemployed presently, and work-face-face are probably multi-generational households. But again, and people go, well, everything should be affordable. I said, timeout. Totally incorrect assumption. It would be great, but even socialism has showed us that that's not possible. I said, why did Jesus in the Bible end up in a manger? Because they couldn't afford anything better and there wasn't anything else for them to get. So about 35 to 40% of any population in the United States is not going to own real estate. Historically, 64% to 66% are going to own real estate. That got up around 68% during the when money was cheap and liars loans were around. But again, we're in a good market. And guys, before you complain or gripe about no inventory, understand you're griping about good times. I don't know how to say that to you diplomatically. Figure out how to do business different to get more of that bite, and then put aside 20%. The other thing is I tell you that you'll probably have to work harder in down times than you will in good times. But right now, we're getting parameters of a different historic set of norms. And I think that those norms will be around easily for 2 years. And foreclosures I've touched on. In a buyer's market, you probably see foreclosures. We're under 6 months inventory, so it's a robust market. We're not going to see foreclosures, so it'll never get to the market. And we're past being a seller's market. We're in a robust market where we have less than a month, 2 months supply. So you're going to see multiple bids, and those multiple bids is due to demand. And again, as long as we see job creation, and again, with that job creation, we are taking that for granted. All of us here in Austin. I teach for other cities, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, etc. Even those cities are extremely jealous of the growth in the announcements that Austin continues to have. And I'm not even talking about the cities that are seeing no growth, such as Midland, such as Lubbock, or, let me get outside the state, Albuquerque, Atlanta. They're going, well, how is Austin Landing? And I said, well, I think it's been something they've been working on for 35 years. Opportunity Austin helped. I said, number one, we go recruit companies to come to the area, not to Austin specifically, not to Round Rock specifically, but to the area. And I said, I do think that promotion of not caring where the company ends up helps. And one of the questions I've had from government officials is, well, why aren't more people going to where the most developed lots are in the pipeline? I said, because they're not areas, the reason there's so many lots in the pipeline in Lago Vista in Hays County is because the demand's not there because of either school districts, work convenience, shopping convenience. And they go, well, I just need one or two answers. And I'm going, it's not that simple. I wish it was. And that's why I like crowd psychology. There's just so many things that dictate the way that, well, and David, because I like it, I'm going to pick on you again. Growing up in home builders, you didn't wear, and it was the mid 70s. Think about that. Long hair, beards, mustaches. Most companies, if you were in sales, would not hire you if you had a beard or a mustache because you weren't trustworthy. No thesis behind that, but just that was the trend at the time. Whereas I'm jealous of all you young guys. I've never been able to grow a beard. This is 6 months growth on that picture. It's acceptable. And you go, well, what does that have to do with anything? I said, everything changes. What was new is old. What's old is new. And yeah, we see some social norms change. We also see buying habits change. And I think we'll continue to see that. One of the more interesting things that I've seen from the production builders, I don't know if you've been out to see this in the DR Horton, Lenars, all of them. They now have a little space called Flex Space. It's not a study. It typically doesn't have a door, but it's a Zoom room. That is what it is. It's a little area off where you can do your computer, set up your computer, set your kids, whatever it is. And I've never, I think I live in a 70-year-old house, so my Flex Place is probably the laundry room or the storeroom outside. But so we continue to adapt. We'll see more open floor plans. The other thing I've seen in the new floor plans is kitchens are going back to galley kitchens, which I think is a mistake in that entry level, but it makes my building, that house, so much cheaper because all my plumbing is in one place, if that makes sense. It's not spread out over a bigger area. So it'll be interesting to see which of these trends are adopted. Guys, I've taken up a ton of your time. I appreciate the questions. If you have more questions, I'm more than happy to do this. Hopefully I've answered your questions. Hopefully you have more answers than you have questions. But if you have more questions, please reach out to Kendra. You can reach out to me, but I get way too many emails a day, so I typically respond to either my upper management or it may be the weekend before I get to it. I try to respond to everything within my company within 8 to 24 hours. It just depends on how busy I am. But I used to write a lot more. I don't have the bandwidth. I do appreciate these type of discussions where people go, well, you said this last year, and now it's 180 degrees from that. When were you right? And my response to you, David, is both times. And you go, what? I said, yeah, things change. And I don't mean that facetiously. I'm smiling at you, but I've been doing this for 45 years, and I'm not always right, but I tend to be the most conservative guy in the room. But we're going to have right. I think you all can hit 20 numbers? I don't think so. You don't have enough inventory. I said that early on last summer. We also had a surge that normally was in spring moved to the summer, which also caused a panic in the market, i.e. everything's selling. I think your biggest issue in 2021 is going to be amount of inventory, is going to be the disappointment of the numerous contracts you write. I think it's probably the end of 2022 before we catch up. We'll see a plateauing at that point for probably a year or so. Then we'll have another surge in Austin. But again, understand that you're in one of the best, if not the best market in the nation. Dallas-Fort Worth is the only place I would invest my money. Otherwise, I don't think any other metro, any other state has everything going for it that we do. Does that mean we'll maintain this? I think that we maintain this for a while. I try to undermine my optimism every morning, and I'm just not able to. Whether I'm talking to our city leadership, our city staff, developers. I mean, the biggest issue we have presently is we don't have enough land. So as we go forward, just keep doing what you're doing and try to do it differently than your competition is. Any other questions?
That's been super helpful. I think it gives people that are thinking about buying this year a lot of confidence to know that this isn't a temporary thing, that this should continue forwards. As long as they have a long-term outlook, they'll be fine. Yeah. Final question. We've got, I said, 350 homes on the market. Generally, inventory peaks in the summer. Are we going to see more inventory, or is it going to just be like this for the whole year?
You're cut down, David. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Are we going to see more inventory over the summer, or is it just going to be like this the entire year?
You're not going to see more inventory. The demand's there. The surge that we normally see will be there, but there's not more inventory. We won't see it for a while.
So the thing for buyers is just buy now. So
rates are low. The house you look at today will probably be gone tomorrow. The apartment you look at today, that rental, will probably be gone tomorrow. I mean, we saw a little hesitation, but a couple months of hesitation is not a trend. A trend is not 90 days. A trend is at least a couple years. And I think that we'll get back to a more stable market, but I think we're 2 to 3 years out from that. And not just here. Dallas-Fort Worth, same thing.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. This has been very helpful and insightful. Thank you, Kindra and Independence Title, for making this happen.
See you. Everybody stay healthy. See you.
All right. Bye.